This is Jeff Fedotin with Believe in Chiefs on the Believe Network, Kansas City's #1 sports podcast network, the only place with a show for every team in KC and more. We believe in our teams. Do you believe? On this week's show, NFL draft writer for NFL Media, Eric Edholm, joins former Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman Joe Valerio. Eric, great to have you on, man.
Just adjusting my hair there, for anybody who might be watching, right? But
you do have a YouTube channel, so I'm glad you did that.
Thank goodness. Yeah, I'm in dire need of a haircut before the draft, boys. Let me tell you, I've been hunkered down, whatever the word is,
Listen,
in my draft cave.
Eric, that's what we want. We want the mad scientist of the draft. That's what we want to hear from right now. That's how we want to hear it. But yeah, this kind of off season has been enough to make your hair go wild, hasn't it? I mean, the NFL does not disappoint when it comes to giving us things to talk about each week, for sure.
No doubt. I mean, it really is. We always say, well, there is no off season. No, I mean, there isn't, right? I mean, everyone will get a little well-earned vacation, but then, mini camps and OTAs happen. I mean, there's rarely a week during the calendar outside of, if we make it past July 4th, we're usually in good shape. But, even last year, Baker Mayfield was traded on July 7th, right? I mean, we can't even get a week off in July. But, yeah, and this draft in particular, guys, I think just big picture, just making a few calls the last few days, no one really knows how it's going to go. There's a lot of question marks. Last year felt a little more firmed up by this point. You felt like you kind of had an idea how the first half of the first round would go. This year, a lot of mystery out there.
Is there a position or a team or a need that's giving you pause and not, letting you sort of solidify it? Like what if you had to put your finger on a few things, what would you give our listeners a couple of bullet points on things to look for or not to look for coming up in this draft?
Well, last year, a little bit unusual these days in that we only had one quarterback in the first 70 some odd picks, 72 or 3, whatever it was, and only one in the top 20, so it didn't really, that lent towards more of a predictable top 10. It's probably my best mock draft in years, accuracy wise, just because you felt like you had a good feel of how things were going to go, even with a couple little surprises. So this year, with potentially four quarterbacks going in the upper parts of round 1, maybe even a 5th at the end of round 1. I personally don't think Hendon Hooker will get in round 1, but he could. I mean, it wouldn't be stunning. So that changes things. You've also got the Jalen Carter factor. There's some off the field stuff that people are, questioning. It might require some ownership sign off. He was the Quinnen Williams a couple years ago when he was sort of viewed as the best football player in the draft, right? You can make that case for Carter. So not knowing where he's going to go certainly throws a wrench, and then no maybe early run on receivers or tackles. So again, it's just kind of a different feel than what we've seen in recent years.
Eric, who are you mocking to the Chiefs right now, and why? Why would that person be a good fit?
I have to look back at who I had in the last mock draft, because I'm actually working on the current final version of this, which apparently is going to sit in some editors' hands for a couple of days, which makes me very nervous. But so I can't remember who I gave him last time, so I'll have to kind of tap dance here on the fly. But I'm still pondering, what the options are going to be this year around,
and that's actually better, because that rather than one guy, maybe a few guys who might be in that area that would kind of, you think that the Chiefs might think about.
Well, in full disclosure, guys, the only reason I came on is to pick your brains to get a better mock draft. What do you guys think? Yeah, no.
Well, touche, Eric. Yeah, exactly.
What can I do, man? At least I'm honest.
Touche, Eric, because I thought Jeff was going to tell our listeners that you were mocking the Chiefs there for a second.
Oh, my goodness.
Phrasing was not the best.
What is Jeff asking here? Because, and now if you take that, if we would have taken that out of context, just say, why are we having Eric on? He's mocking the Chiefs, but the draft. Okay.
Kind of hard to mock a team that's won 66 games and 2 Super Bowls in 5 years. I'd have to dig pretty deep, but yeah, no, I mean, I think I would probably, to eventually get to your question here, I would think wide receiver. depending on how many are off the board. I would think pass rusher, because it's, I mean, he's still, I think, even with, the guy they signed, Menahu, and, even with Karl Aftis in year 2, and, guys like Mike Dana still on the roster and whatnot. I mean, I think they still have a room for another one. I could see a tight end at some point. I don't know if round 1's in play. A tackle, offensive tackle, certainly has to be on the menu at some point. Is that the right spot in the draft? We'll see. So yeah, I would say somewhere on that defensive front, somewhere at receiver would be in play, and some other positions as well.
Wow, Jeff, somebody's been reading our diary.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Because Eric, we're right there with you. I mean, Jeff and I have been talking about that leading up to this. Has there been any move in free agency, Chiefs or heavy competitor of the Chiefs, that our listeners would be interested in hearing? Has there been any big move that's affected this draft for any team that you can think of? Because it started out hot and heavy, right? The free agent, it kind of slowed down a little bit as we've gotten closer to the draft. It was moving there for a while.
It was, yeah. I don't know that there was a single move that you could point to. For instance, even division rival Raiders, getting Jimmy Garoppolo, like, big move for them, right? Even if we know, I don't think that takes them out of quarterback. I really don't. And they've been doing more than due diligence on the top. They've had all the top quarterbacks in. They've certainly done their homework on the second tier and third tier guys at that position as well. There's not a big second tier this year. It's a lot of first and a lot of third tier, right? So, but still, they are sitting in that kind of perch at number 7, where they can kind of see how the top of the draft plays out. And I'll say this: there's been a lot of buzz about the possibility of the Texans passing on a quarterback at 2. If that happens, the floodgates open up. Who knows what's going to happen? All of a sudden, Arizona's very much in business at number 3. Multiple, 3 different quarterbacks on the board. A team like the Raiders certainly could get aggressive. Think about their front office too. I mean, Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler, both from New England. Monty Ossenfort, the new GM in Arizona, cut his teeth in New England under Bill Belichick. And really, it's funny how many New England guys control the top of the draft.
Yeah.
You've even got Mike Vrabel kind of stalking and possibly in quarterback mode. And you've got Houston with Caserio in New England's picking 14th. So there's a huge former Patriots flavor at the top of the draft. And I wouldn't be shocked if a couple of those teams end up doing business in a trade, and it might involve a quarterback. So there's a lot of things to juggle this year.
Great stuff there, Eric. Well, betonline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs: basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use your promo code BLEAV, that's BELIEVE, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're here with Eric Edholm of NFL Media, the NFL Draft Czar. Is that the title you said to go with? I can't.
Grand Poobah is what it is.
Grand Poobah. Eric, a lot of Chiefs fans are really been a lot of hubbub and talk over the offseason about the wide receiver position. Fans are, it's funny because it's like, well, you were able to replace Tyreek Hill pretty capably, so you maybe relax a little bit, but there's a lot of, so just kind of take us through your thoughts on maybe the wide receiver class and maybe a couple guys that might fit the Chiefs if they do draft one at some, and they likely will at some point.
Yeah. And I think, late 20s is going to be a really interesting spot, depending on what a couple teams in front of them do, like the Giants and whatnot. whatnot. When the first one goes off the board, for that matter. In my opinion, Jackson Smith and Jigba is, and I think by a healthy margin, the best receiver in this class. I kind of liken him to a Julian Edelman, Cooper Kupp type. I think he's that kind of, slasher. He can take a short pass and rip off 17 yards. He can run an over route if you need him to, crossing routes. He's got that, good build, but also has the quickness. So I think he's the top guy. But the question is, who's number two? I think you could get 3 or 4 different answers. I really do. And that kind of reflects on this class. Not that it's bad, but first of all, we've been so spoiled the last 4 or 5 years in the draft, right? That this would be a pretty respectable group by pre-2017 or 18 standards, I would say. So it just lacks great size. So there's a few longer receivers who I think will do okay. And even some of the smaller guys didn't test the way you would normally expect, right? We have 173-pound Jordan Addison, 175-pound Jalen Hyatt, 170-pound Josh Downs, and those guys are running in the 4.4s, which is good. It's fast, but it's not fast for 170 or 180 pounders. So, there's a little bit of, there's some warts on a lot of these guys. And I think there are a lot more Robins than there are Batmen, I guess would be the plural of that. So Batmans. But yeah, I think you'll see some pretty solid sleepers in day 3, maybe not amazing, but a couple guys who will emerge, and some good respectable players on day 2 who are better than guys drafted ahead of them. But I don't know this is going to be a banner year, but there are definitely receivers to be had, especially for a team like the Chiefs. If you think about it, like, okay, you're replacing Mecole Hardman. We can find that. We can find that in this draft class.
Eric, what do you think makes the NFL draft what it is? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's the most hyped. I mean, as we're in the basketball playoffs right now, we know basketball and the NBA is popular. Hockey, we could probably put aside a little bit. It's probably still a niche sport for a lot of people.
Sure.
Baseball draft sometimes goes off, and I don't even know if anybody knows it happened. With all the rounds that they have, like, what do you think makes it what it is? Is there some secret sauce that makes it want to be a nationally televised, hyped event like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because the NFL didn't ever view it that way, as back in the day, right? It was held in the smoky hotel ballroom in New York or Philly or wherever they had it back in the day, and mostly New York City. And then there started to become more interest in the league and kind of the minutia of the league, and guys like Dr. Z got into the details of the inner workings of the league, and then you had people like Mel Kiper and Joel Buchsbaum from PFW as guys who, really pulled back the curtain, I think, on how the draft worked. And I always pay respect to that, because I don't know that we would have the draft culture and obsession that we have now, to, like you said, to where you can have it in Las Vegas, you can host a rolling road show and take it to Kansas City. You can, Cleveland, Chicago, Philly, everywhere they've been the last 10 years. And I think part of it is like, it's almost for some people kind of like the NCAA tournament. It's an event, and it's not a one-day thing. It's a multiple-day thing where you can now wager on it legally. You had to do it illegally before. You can fill out, your mock drafts and see how good a scout you are. Anybody who follows college and NFL has some sort of rooting interest in what's going on. So it's a crossover of college football fans and NFL fans all coming together in a weird sort of pool of I mean, and plus we're a little football starved by this point. We've gone through the first few phases of withdrawal, and it's like, man, all right, now we need something. And this for years was the one oasis until, end of July. So a little different now, but still you can have this a 3-day primetime event and have it rake in the ratings.
Yeah. I mean, it was 32 short years ago that I was drafted. My God, that's a really
awesome.
long time ago.
Do you remember the date? Do you remember the actual date you were picked? Was it April whatever? Or
Can you believe I don't remember the date?
I didn't know. I
How
just I didn't
crazy
know if
is
that
that?
was something. Yeah.
I mean,
You
I
got to be coming
remember
up on the.
everything else about it. But
I
back
could probably
then,
figure it out.
the second round wasn't even televised.
Right,
So
exactly. Maybe you get a couple picks, but if you're lucky, right,
yeah, and
exactly.
they happened that year. They happened to have one of the longest first rounds in history. Every team had used, I think back then it was still the allotted 15 for the first round, and by that time it was over. So I was getting updates on the radio at that point on our local radio.
That's
We didn't even have like satellite radio back then, right? Or
that's
streaming.
amazing.
There was no streaming service in 1991. So it was basically in Philadelphia. It's KYW, which is the local news station, and
Yep.
AM. And they would just give updates like every 15 minutes whenever they would give sports updates, and that's
And you
how
had to
we
wait
were.
till the newspaper the next day,
Wow.
right? To see
Yeah.
who got picked. Yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. So I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I know that's 3 decades, so that's a long time for things to change. But man, how things have changed,
Yeah.
and that's why that's made me think about it and wanted to ask you your opinion on that. Because is it the Goodell factor? Is it him? Did his Hollywood sort of mystique have something to do with it, and his ability to sort of raise the stakes of the game? It just seems like maybe that's coincidental, or I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, sorry, Jeff, go ahead. What are you going to say?
I think Eric's point too about the crossover, if whether you're a college football fan or an NFL fan, is popular. And then the other thing, I think that I know this is fun for me too, is like you kind of get to play GM. Like, oh
Right.
man, what a great pick. Oh, they should have done this. What are they doing? It's just like kind of like an NFL fantasy for something for fans.
Right. Absolutely. And by the way, you were drafted on April 21st, 1991.
Okay.
I just looked that up. So
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it.
happy draft anniversary in a couple days. Yeah. I agree. I think the, like filling out your brackets, this is what I'm thinking how I did it as a kid, like I would fill out my brackets and I would fill out my mock draft. They would do a blank mock draft in the USA Today and I would go out and get one on the Saturday morning, or Friday afternoon, whatever, fill it out, the day before the draft. And I think there was just a generation of dorky football fans like me out there who are now middle-aged, right? And they're still, and it's grown up along with us. And when they first put it on TV, people probably thought, what in the world are they broadcasting? Picks being read off of a microphone. But, when John Elway's come along and Bo Jackson's come along and these unicorns, it draws people in a little bit, and then you can get them in a little farther. Oh, the Notre Dame kid just got, I don't know. So it just has so many different tentacles to it that makes it a quirky and fascinating event.
Eric, do you have a couple favorite prospects in this draft? And I don't mean like a Bryce Young that everybody knows, but like a couple guys you're like, oh man, that you've kind of really fallen in love with during the process as you're scouting these guys.
Yeah, let me try to think of a good little variety here if I can. I mean, I mentioned Jackson Smith-Njigba, he barely played this year. I mean, he played, the equivalent of about a game and a half this year because of injuries. But I got reminded how good he is. I mean, everyone sort of fretted over his speed or his lack of speed. He's like a 4.5 guy. I don't think he's slow, right? But Cooper Kupp was a 4.7 guy on a time speed. I mean, anyone who watches him doesn't think he's slow because of his gear changes and his direction changing ability and how he slips out of tackles. Who cares if he's slow, right? I mean, so that's what I kept coming back to every time I watched him, was him making either a contested catch when he couldn't gain, huge separation, or if you gave him enough time, he was crafty enough as a route runner to get open. So he's definitely one. Paris Johnson from Ohio State. The more I've watched him, I know these are a little higher on the list, but the more I thought, wow, he's really rock solid. And and he'll show those little flashes of nastiness. And he's a smart kid, and he's an impossibly large human being. I'm a little surprised there hasn't been more buzz on him, right? Just with his length and his athletic ability, but 2-position starter, 2 right guard, left tackle. Another one who is, I think at the Senior Bowl was when the crush first sunk in. Keanu Benton, a defensive lineman from Wisconsin. I just thought, who is this junkyard dog? I'd watched him before, but it was I'll tell you, and Joe, I mean, obviously, being in the trenches and everything, but I mean, like watching one-on-one drills up close, when your eyes are right there and you can watch every hand movement and every little bit of leverage and how their feet are and their hips and how much they're bending and not bending, up close versus on tape or TV is a massive difference. And this kid was firing off the ball and giving people problems. So Keanu Benton definitely grew on me as I watched him dominate Senior Bowl and then, go through the combine and test pretty well too.
Okay, so I'll make it personal again and come back to a question about the FCS. What are you thinking there? I mean, I know there's a lot of Cody Mouch. There's a lot of look at him. I think he might be listed as the number one, and of course the big guy, which is interesting, right? Which is unusual. Usually, I don't know. Usually, a lot of times at the FCS level, it's the speed or some skill specialty position because they were, not highly recruited, and offensive and defensive line are such mature positions. Usually they're saved for the SEC, or the big conferences. But anybody you looking at there, including Cody, that's kind of standing out that could be one of those Jerry Rice type moments. Like, man, there was somebody that was Walter Payton. Who's the next Walter Payton or Jerry Rice in this draft?
Yeah, I don't know that there's quite that guy in this draft, but there are a few who are fascinating for sure. And the thing about, if you're interested in Cody Mauch, for instance, is okay, he played college tackle, probably like him at guard or center. Most teams seem to. He looks like he could play there, do well at the Senior Bowl, snap the ball well. I mean, I think he's going to be a solid, late second, early third round pick, top 75, let's say, somewhere between 45 and 75, I would say. And you feel pretty good about him because North Dakota State has produced, like, they're the one school of all those FCS schools that I think you feel like is a offensive line producer, and you say, okay, I can trust these guys. They've produced other guys before. There's a comfort level there, I guess. And he's a good kid. I think he'll work hard and do well. Two other ones, though, that have a chance to be, including one who plays Rice's position, Tucker Kraft from South Dakota State. I think we're sleeping on him a little bit. And it's based on some conversations I've had, based on what I've seen. I thought a good player, not a great one, but then I started watching and kind of seeing stuff that I didn't see before as I got to know him a little bit better. He's got some burst to him. Remember, Dallas Goedert went to South Dakota State as well. So, again, there's a trust level in the sense that this is a program that's produced a high level tight end before. Tight end's a tricky position, as you guys know. And I think the kid has the athletic traits, the length, the will as a blocker. He's not there yet technique wise, but he gives the effort. And I think some surprisingly explosive ability as a receiver. So he's kind of in that second round range, I would say. He'll probably be he might be the first FCS guy off the board. Andre Yosivas from Princeton, I think, is going to be, he's sort of similar to Christian Watson for the Packers last year we saw. Not quite as, I don't think he'll go 35th or whatever. He'll go probably a round lower than that, maybe. McClendon Curtis, a kid from Chattanooga, another Senior Bowl player. I didn't know anything about him before I went down there. I'd seen the name, but I didn't really watch him. And I thought he held up well at tackle. I thought he held up well at guard. It's gotten to the point where most people are saying now maybe he could play some tackle in the NFL. Probably a guard, but you never know. So, yeah, the FCS players, this is an okay crop by recent standards. Not great. There's no superstar, but a few solid players there. And Kraft and Yosivas, I think, are the two that have a chance to be, possibly very good, Pro Bowl good.
Bryce Young is going number one, right? Like, if you think, or what have you been hearing?
I think so. Yeah. In fact, I was, when that trade went down with the Bears and Panthers, my immediate reaction was, I think they're taking CJ. And I really just sort of thought I could see Frank Reich taking him. Like, I could see it. And you sort of just, I don't know. Maybe I talked myself into it. And of course I called the Panthers. They weren't going to give it to me. No, they didn't give it to anybody else either, but it's slowly leaked out that Young is their guy. Here's the question I'll pose. I don't know if this is true or not. This is just me just talking out here. Is it possible that Bryce Young wasn't Frank's first choice? I don't know. That's a question I would ask him at his first press conference, right? I think the owner, David Tepper, has a hand in Young being the pick. I do. I don't know that he made the final call, but I think that's his preferred choice. I'd love to know, who else, the other people who Scott Fitter, the GM, and Reich and Josh McCown and and Caldwell and all these guys in the building. Well, who do they like first? They won't tell us, but that's what I want to know.
Hey, Eric, has it, I'm like, I feel like I have you on 60 Minutes here. I'm asking all these tough questions, right? I'm not asking, Jeff's asking
no, I like it.
I just like, Eric, what's your favorite color? I mean,
yeah,
Joe's
exactly.
Joe's going
I'm kind of a burnt sienna guy. Yes.
He's throwing you all the softballs. But what do you think having the receipts? Yeah, I'm trying to be pop culture there.
Yeah, right.
My daughters will be proud. Do you think having the receipts has made a media person or a journalist job harder when it comes to this kind of prognosticating drafts and doing things? Because I don't mean to get controversial, but that Merrill Hodge, Skip Bayless clip that was going around about Johnny Manziel, like
I've seen it.
Tell you, I had to watch it like 4 times because it's because it's a train wreck, right? But man, whether you love either of those guys, good or bad, like the whole thing, it just made me think like, man, like, geez, like, you got to have an opinion and you want people to have an opinion, but man, you don't also want to be coming back X amount of years later and somebody going, what were you thinking? Because there's a lot of people out there that went, Patrick Mahomes going in the first round. No way. Like, right. Cause it happens, right? Cause people have their opinions on what a good player is. So I was just wondering, curious if that makes your job harder. I'm sure it does, right?
Hi, my name is Eric Edholm, and I gave Patrick Mahomes a B- this is a cleansing process.
I didn't mean
no. I'm volunteering this information because it is good for all of us. My point is this. I don't think you should be ashamed of having a bad take at one point.
I definitely
not. Like, who in the world was predicting that Mahomes was going to blowtorch the league, right? You have to have a little bit of perspective, too, on the other side. Criticism is fine. I've never shied away from that. Have I cringed at some of the things I've written? Of course. Like you're writing a story and you think, well, yeah, I wrote about this once before, and you start looking at it 2 or 3 years old, let's say, and you're reading through it and nothing is holding up. Like, you know what I mean? To the point where you don't even want to link to it in your own story. You think, oh God, none of that came true. So yeah, it's part of the deal. You're going to be wrong. What is it? The leading batter in MLB hits 340 maybe, right? Mock drafters are lucky to hit 200. I mean, so if you're doing this, you have to have a thick skin. You have to have a good sense of humor about it. You have to put it in perspective. I don't think it makes the job harder, but having billions of sets of eyes is both a blessing and a curse on what you do, and something will always come back to bite you, I'm sure.
No, that's a great answer. Thank you. I thought that would be a fun one to talk about.
I love the clip too, so I appreciate the question. Yeah.
Great perspective there, Eric. Well, Eric, tell people where listeners can find you on NFL.com, your Twitter handle, MySpace page, whatever you want to go give for where people can find you.
Yeah. I got a hot MySpace page. You guys aren't ready for that, but Twitter is like pretty much I do have a Facebook page. Don't use it really, but Twitter, Eric with a C _Edholm, EDHOLM, and then NFL.com. I've got final mock, I think, comes out on Monday of draft week. I've got a Jahmyr Gibbs story coming up. Going to talk to him this week, and got some other stuff. My top 100 list just came out recently, and doing a little news along the way. And I'll be coming to Kansas City, and it's been a while, man. I haven't been there in forever. I'm a Mizzou guy, and I love Kansas City, but I'm excited to finally get back and see some drafting.
Awesome. And Eric, don't forget to go through all those little slips of paper you used to fill out back to the 91 draft and see maybe where you had me.
Right. I want to see where you had Joe going. Yeah.
I didn't think I had you in my top 50, and you went.
Yeah.
I think you went exactly 50th, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
People were like, wait, did the Chiefs just take somebody from Penn State? What just happened there?
The other one.
Yeah,
the smart ones. Yeah.
This is awesome. Eric, you are fantastic. And what a treat to have you, and for our listeners get to hear it, not just see it in writing or on a tweet, but to hear your voice going through all this stuff, because you're amazing at this. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're too kind. It's a pleasure. I love hopping on with you guys. Like I said, it's our annual little draft tradition. So let's keep it going another year. And I'm looking forward to April 27th.
Absolutely. Well, if you enjoy this show presented by Bet Online, please subscribe. We're available on your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Luminary, and TuneIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.